Chapter 15. Two men in flannel and camouflage approached, just silhouettes with powerful flashlights. One jerked his head toward a wide patch of muddy earth, ringed with lines Claire suspected were salt. "This way," he said, barely acknowledging Claire or Kyle, before focusing on Autumn. He had a rifle slung over his shoulder, muzzle pointing at the snow. Claire took in a sharp breath and guided Autumn over uneven ruts, Kyle hovering close. Snow crunched, turning to slush beneath the wheels. When they cleared the final turn, she saw her father standing at the center of an impromptu ritual ground. Torches formed a ragged circle, their flames casting everything in a lurid, wavering glow. About a dozen figures stood around, half shrouded in shadows. Some gripped shotguns, others held Bibles or wore mismatched camo. The father stood in a tattered flannel coat over a threadbare sweater, clutching a leather-bound Bible. He raised his arms in a slow, theatrical gesture. "Claire!" he boomed, his voice echoing across the clearing. "And you've brought your friend. Good. This is God's hour." She felt her chest tighten. She felt what seemed like an unseen presence coiled around her ankles like invisible chains. She swallowed, forcing words out. "What's all this?" Her father's eyes gleamed with an unholy fervor. He nodded at the lines of salt that spiraled outward, forming a wide circle. "You know what this is, sweetie. We stand at the threshold. Watchers roost all around. But if you submit to the Almighty's ritual, we can chase them off and make them do His bidding." "His bidding?" Kyle muttered under his breath, rolling his eyes. One of the armed men glared, shifting a shotgun so it glinted in the torchlight. Kyle fell silent. Autumn typed on her device, and the tinny voice emerged in a hush. "I feel them," it said. "They're close." Her father stiffened, clutching the worn Bible to his chest. "Yes, the watchers gather at the edges." He lifted his gaze to the black sky where swirling snow devoured any sign of moon or stars. "They sense your affliction, girl, your hopelessness. All I can do is show you the holy path to drive them away." She noted that the father had laid out small lumps of something near the salt lines. Animal bones, maybe? A rancid stench drifted in and out with each gust of wind. "Let's get this over with," she managed, voice taut. Her father's lips stretched into a grin. "Into the circle, then." He pointed at a spot near its center. Claire hesitated, but she couldn't ignore the prickle of her father's men observing her every move. She gently angled the wheelchair until Autumn's front wheels bumped the ring of salt. The father stepped forward, eyebrows knitting together. "She can't stay in that chair for what's next," he said, his voice a strange mixture of command and excitement. "She must be placed in the center, kneeling or lying down." She almost snapped. "She can't kneel. She can't walk." Father's expression darkened, but he forced a smile. "Then we do what we must." Before she could protest further, a pair of cult members moved in. They lifted Autumn under the arms, ignoring the pained gasp that she let out. Claire's anger flared, and she rushed to help, guiding Autumn as gently as possible. She let out a breath, heart pounding. "Be calm. This is for Autumn. Or maybe we're insane." She swallowed back the urge to lash out. Kyle stood silent. One of the men unceremoniously laid Autumn on the cold, salted ground. Claire started forward, fists balled, but father's men tensed, half raising their guns. The hush surged, thick enough to taste, and her next words died in her throat. Her father knelt beside Autumn, murmuring a line of scripture. He rubbed a thin mixture of oil and ash across Autumn's forehead. The hush pressed in, so intense that Claire's ears rang. "Dear Lord," father intoned, "lend us your righteous watchers to devour the evil that clings to this sinner's body." Father had once ranted about watchers as angels of punishment. Now he called them like benevolent guardians. She shot Kyle a despairing look. He stood off to the side, face ashen, arms clenched. The circle of armed followers watched with unnerving calm. One or two whispered along with their father's chanting, but others looked anxious, stepping back when the wind gusted. A torch sputtered, flaring high. Then another. A flicker of motion swept across the clearing. Claire whipped her head around, catching only a fleeting shape near the ring of salt. Something multi-limbed and winged, or was it just the torch's distortion? Her heart hammered. From his knees, Father's voice rose in a rough chant that mixed biblical lines with something else. She recognized hints of the Arcana Hermetica's archaic phrases. It sounded like, "Augurs at the threshold, stand guard, bind devourers to the holy word, spare no flesh that harbors sin." The hush grew louder with each syllable, like static in her bones. Autumn lay there shivering. Her eyes were half-lidded, jaw slack as if in a trance. Claire crouched, placing a hand on her friend's arm. "Hey, girl," she breathed. "Are you all right?" The small woman managed a tiny nod. Her fingers twitched in signs her friend almost didn't catch. "I see them." Father smacked the Bible shut with a sharp crack. "Behold," he announced, voice trembling with zeal. "They gather on the margins, waiting for our devotion. We will push them to cure you, or to devour the sickness in your soul." "Stop," Claire hissed, unable to bear the father's twisted reverence. She wanted to pull Autumn away, but her father grabbed his daughter's wrist with surprising force. He looked up at her, eyes blazing. "There is no going back," he growled. "You brought this girl expecting deliverance? Then you must let me do this." He yanked his daughter's arm aside, not harshly enough to harm her, but enough to remind her she wasn't in control. The hush seethed. A breeze circled the clearing, whipping through the salt lines, stinging Claire's cheeks with sharp flecks of ice. The circle of men around them began chanting softly, halting phrases that she couldn't decipher. Something about watchers, devourers, holy legion. The torches flared again. Shadows. For one horrifying moment, she glimpsed multiple shadows crossing the ground that didn't match the people standing around. Something tall and winged flitted across the circle's edge, then dissolved when she tried to focus on it. An unnatural ache weighed on her chest, as though invisible hands pressed down, listening to her every heartbeat. "Lord," the father rumbled, "bind these watchers to your will. Let them feed upon the sick flesh, leaving the worthy soul purified." A choking noise escaped Claire's throat. She glared at him, incensed. "If you lay one finger on her," she started, but then a torch collapsed, scattering sparks. A swirl of black feathers shot across the flame, and she realized with a jolt that it wasn't just feathers. It was something bigger. Was it a crow? No, it moved like an emaciated shape with ragged edges, gliding across the ground faster than any bird, gone in an instant. The hush pounded like a drum. Her father's eyes flicked to the swirling darkness, and for an instant he smiled, as though seeing an old friend. Claire's heart kicked painfully at her ribs. She saw the rest of the group recoil or mutter. Kyle hovered a few steps behind his girlfriend, motionless. "Proceed," Father barked at the onlookers. "Chant. They're listening. They demand our reverence." The chanting resumed, louder. Lines from Enoch or Daniel, she couldn't be sure. The swirl of words battered her ears. Autumn squirmed on the ground, her lips parted in a silent gasp. Claire dropped to her knees, reaching for her friend's hand. She felt sick, the hush pressing like an ocean overhead. A sudden stench wafted by, something like burnt hair. Another flame sputtered. In the flickering light, Claire caught a glimpse of Father's face, unhinged triumph mixed with shaky fear he tried to hide. His gaze snapped at her. "Stay back," he snarled, as if expecting the watchers to materialize in plain sight any second. Her breath turned ragged. She peered around, hyperventilating so hard she was beginning to have tunnel vision, and her hands were going numb. Kyle's eyes were wide, locked on the ring of men with guns who seemed caught between awe and terror. Her father lifted the Bible overhead again, voice climbing to a near shout. "O watchers of the threshold," he cried, "take her ailment, devour the sin, purge the rot." His words vanished into the hush, eaten by swirling static that roared across the young woman's senses. She tasted iron on her tongue. A torch behind the father wavered, flame dancing violently. All at once, the hush snapped into a dense, suffocating blanket of stillness. Even the chanting halted mid-syllable, leaving a vacuum of sound. Claire's ears rang in the sudden silence. Her father's lips moved, but no voice emerged. An unseen wind blasted through the clearing, toppling one torch after another. The ring of light collapsed, painting everyone in frantic shadows. She heard half a dozen rifles clatter or men swear. Something big flickered across the circle's edge, a fiery shape with multiple wings extended. In the half-dark, it looked too large to be a bird, too fluid to be a man, and too bony to be alive. She couldn't scream. The hush choked her voice. She locked eyes with Autumn, whose pupils were blown wide. Then Father lunged toward the center, arms outstretched, either praising or pleading, his face glistening with sweat and euphoria. "They're here," he mouthed, silent, a bead of spittle at the corner of his mouth. Claire reached for Autumn's hand. Kyle rushed to her side, stepping over the scattered lumps of salt. The hush hammered all three of them, so thick Claire felt pressure building in her skull. She sensed watchers, the devourers, Father had called. They hovered, half-formed in the wavering torchlight. For one horrible instant she thought she saw an eyeless face with a smashed-in nose and bloody, tattered feathers, parted lips and a perpetual hiss. Then Father, kneeling in the circle, pressed both palms to the ground. The hush snapped with an electric crack, like static discharging, and Claire's hearing rushed back with a painful pop. Father's voice returned in a hoarse roar. "Almighty, bind them!" Torches flared high. Flames soared, sparking across the clearing. She threw an arm over her face, teeth clenched, as the hush shattered into a maelstrom of chanting and wild wind. She felt something heavy and unseen crash into her shoulder. Autumn gasped, a desperate intake of breath. Kyle grabbed his girlfriend's sleeve, face pale. "We have to—" He never finished. Behind them, a gunshot cracked the air. One of Father's men had stumbled or fired by accident, and the bullet soared off into the dark. Cult members broke their circle, some darting back, others crying out. Claire whirled, panic strangling her. That's when the watchers surged forward in earnest, ephemeral shapes that slid between the torches. Their presence devoured any coherence the chanting had. Father let out a giddy, crazed cackle. She seized Autumn's wrist, trying to pull her free. Kyle batted away a fumbling cult member who blocked them. The Father turned, raising a hand as though to stop them from escaping. Flames crackled. Snow whirled. Claire felt watchers sliding in from all sides, devouring the last scraps of reason. She couldn't breathe. She heard her father's roar vanish into the hush once more, the swirling shapes converging on the center circle where Autumn lay. This was it. They'd stepped into the most horrible place imaginable. A final gust flung salt across the ground, snuffing half the torches. One last torch remained, guttering, light dancing wildly on everyone's faces. Father's voice strangled in his throat. Claire tried to scream, reaching for Autumn as watchers lunged, and the final torch died. Total darkness. Total hush.